Welcome to the Save Childhood podcast with Jennifer McCarville. Because childhood has changed, but children have not.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Save Childhood podcast. I'm Jennifer McCarville.
And I'm Nicole Dugan. And today we are talking about a book that we loved at a grown-up book talk that we had at our school, featuring the book Raising Securely Attached Kids by Eli Harwood, using connection-focused parenting to create confidence, empathy, and resilience. And we call it a grown-up book talk because at our school we have book talks for the children, and then we have book talks for the adults.
We have book club for the children.
Oh, book club
That's
for the
why.
children,
Yeah.
and grown-up book talk for the adults.
Right.
And today Sophia is with us, and she leads and organizes our grown-up book talks. And so Sophia, tell us about the book, why we picked it, how book talks came to be at Marvelously Made. Tell us all the things.
Okay. Hi, thank you for having me. This is my fourth year at the school, and I, from the first year, was able to start attending these book talks. And it's just such a beautiful way to get into the community with other parents, reading various parenting books covering so many things: emotional intelligence, discipline, learning styles. And it just was such a blessing to me as I was learning and growing. And so leading them has been incredible. I love reaching out and saying, hey, come, it's casual. Let's sit and connect and learn together.
I just want to interject on that too, that if you're thinking about, as you should, if you have a community, everybody has a community of learners, whether it's parents listening or it's educators who want to get together. One of the beautiful things about our book talks is that a lot of the teachers show up, which is great. Teachers that have children at the school, teachers that don't, because we're all learning how to best care for children to make them as mentally, cognitively, emotionally healthy as we can. And so that's a really great thing. But whatever your community is, we have a private Facebook group that our parents and teachers are involved in, and you do such a beautiful job of making such a warm invitation repeatedly, like bringing people in and giving them touch points about the book and the process of reading between book talks. And so I want to encourage anybody who does that to make it that kind of authentic connection where you're saying, like you were just talking about, like, come, it's easy, it's casual, we're human. We're just all very raw. Like we're just real people doing the real thing, and it's grown exponentially since you took that role, and it's been such a huge blessing for I know our community, and it's been a beautiful thing to see. And it is the way that you do say, come on, we know we had a cookie exchange because when we have the December when we have a cookie exchange, and that can be a lot of pressure. And I've shared before, when my children, who are adults, when they were little, I was in a mother's group where we were supposed to bring a food to a potluck lunch every time we met, which was once a month. And I actually quit going because I was so overwhelmed after I had my second one, and my husband worked at night, and I was there, and it was just a lot, and it was all I could do to get through the rough nights, right? That I was like, I can't go because I can't make a casserole. I can't. And of course I could have driven through and picked up something, but also we were financially so strapped because I was staying home with our children that wasn't it. So all of those factors can be barriers to why people participate, whatever that is. And so we're having the cookie exchange, but also there's such a warmth about the way you embrace and include people and draw them in, that people just come as they are. Like you don't have to bring a cookie. You don't have to. And so there's a joy in the whole experience of sharing and growing together as a community. And with the grown-up book talk site, that has really been something that I really appreciate you for, because it's made such a huge difference. I think it's important. Thank you. Yeah,
It's been important for me.
The books that are chosen for book talk always focus on brain research and child development, which supports our philosophy at the school as well. So teachers, parents, we're all coming together and our learning community is such a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to plug right there that the books that we do choose and read and discuss together are all supportive of our philosophy.
And that's a really fun thing, because I think, Sophia, you can talk a little bit about the process of choosing the book, because there are tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of parenting books. I feel like they're cranking out. Anybody can publish a book right now, and it's like you can get a bazillion parenting books. And this, from the start, was one of our important foundational approaches. Is a lot of books are bad. A lot of advice is bad. And what makes it bad, it's not based on development. It's not based on brain research, which, as you all know, I've been in the field over 30 years, and the research doesn't change. What kids need doesn't change. And that's, why we have the Save Childhood movement is, childhood has changed, but children have not. And so there's a lot of bad stuff out there. So we're really particular about the book.
A lot of pressure.
And I want to say, I am going to let you talk, but I want to say also that in choosing these books, this is a beautiful thing for someone who might want to start a book talk in their community, is always check if it's available on Audible and how long it is on Audible, because you are so great at that. So I'm going to let you share that. And I feel like we're kind of starting this, and we're talking about how to create a grown-ups book talk, which is great. So, we'll add some tips and information to that, hopefully. But yeah, tell them about that process, because it's kind of funny.
Oh, well, yes. I can't help but feel a little bit of pressure every time. I'm like, oh, what if I pick a bad one? There's so many out there. And I usually, Jennifer and I work together, and we pick a few, and then we narrow it down. And but then we have lots of recommendations coming in, which is a beautiful thing. So now that the community has been reading for a while, this was actually a huge blessing of a recommendation. It was so similar to one we read just before, and I might not have picked it, just reading about it online. So that happens, and it's organic, and it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And one thing I wanted to mention that we also do is each time we have a book talk, we purchase 3 to go into a parent lending library. Yeah. And that's an incredible resource that our school provides for the parents. So that's wonderful. So then
you're able to do that. That's
we're
a beautiful
stocking
thing.
It. Yes.
And you know what else is happening? I'm sure you're aware of this, but a lot of times parents who don't mark up their books, which I don't really understand those people, but there are people who don't do that. And the beautiful thing about that is some of those people, when they're finished with the book, donate it to the lending library. Yes. So then we have additional books, and it's just kind of built over time. And we don't put anything in the parent lending library that we have not read.
Right.
And so, unless it's a book talk book and we're just starting it, but if we ever got a horrible one, we would definitely pull it out. But don't be afraid of making a bad choice from time to time, because that makes the conversation pretty.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because are you ever going to agree with 100% of a book on parenting? I don't know.
I hope not.
I would argue to say no, right? So you take bits and pieces, and it's all about your season and where you are, right? So
right.
I know there's one book we've read 3 times just because it's kind of a staple in our community, and I've had different emotions, and I've absorbed different things from it each time.
That's so true.
It is very true.
Because you're in a different season, even next month.
Yep.
But definitely in another year or in another. So,
right.
But yeah, the process of choosing the books. We used to have, in the beginning, we had read every one of them for the first several years before we ever put it in a book talk. But because they are published at such an incredible rate, and there are so many, it's hard to even keep up with. And we have these incredible families also who are always improving their knowledge and their reading, and they're saying, well, what about this book? And it was published this year or last year. And so on one hand, writing might change and society changes a little, but the books that are about how children develop are pretty solid, even if they're older. But to get the new ones in there, we can't possibly read them all. So we've taken a few risks.
We have taken some risks, and we've gotten, not called out on it, but we've had some people who they've had some that weren't their favorite.
And that's really awesome, because
and we've
we're
had
thinking
some good conversation about it, like you said. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And you're really great at weeding out some that would not be
supportive.
We just don't want to waste time.
Reviews help. So you read a lot of reviews.
You listen to the clips, you read the reviews, but we meet about it, we spend a lot of time about it. And I know you are spending more and more, you spend the time by yourself now, and then you come to me and you've already done all that work, which you're amazing. Yeah. It matters. But also, if you don't have that kind of time to invest in creating a grown-ups book talk, just be encouraged to have one.
Just start.
Just have a book. Yeah, just have a book club talk. whatever you're going to call it where you are. Okay, so now you know how to do it.
Start today.
That's right.
This book is a lot about connection and building relationships, and that is what we know the number one thing in the classroom that needs to be done first is building a relationship with the children. And so but it's important in parenting as well, is that connection, but it goes beyond that to talk about our own childhoods and how that connects to our parenting. Tell us a little bit about that.
So Harwood did focus a lot on just past traumas and getting through and healing those traumas. Or, I say traumas, and it can be that for some people, and it might not be as extreme as that. You might be thinking, I didn't go through anything severe, but we all have our little things.
Our
baggage, right? And so what she's pointing out is that usually when you're triggered by your children or behaviors, look at what that might be reflecting in you. And so there was a lot of self-reflection, which, was maybe a little hard for some parents. We had some really good feedback from this book. A lot of parents loved it. But it was also like, ooh, whoa, that was me. That was talking to me, not about my kids.
I didn't hear from anybody who didn't enjoy it, but I did hear from a few people who said it was an easy read, which doesn't mean, it's not fluffy. This author has a really great knack for making the information accessible and easy to access. And I love that. I think that is so great. It was an easy read, but basically they were saying it was a hard read because of the heart impact it would have on them. And even those people enjoyed this book. So that was interesting. We usually have one or two people who don't enjoy a book so much, but I didn't get that. I don't know if you heard that feedback, but I didn't this time.
I didn't either. I think it was, I think with our attendance, it was an overwhelming, yes, I'd recommend the book. But yes, definitely some different feelings on what they all brought to the table, right? Because it's kind of a generational piece when you start looking at, how I'm coming into parenting, how that's affecting my children, and what Harwood's talking about is healing those things so that your children get to adulthood and they're not healing as much, right?
To build strong children so that they don't have to repair their childhoods, that concept.
Concept. It's a great concept. And she talks about, not having a childhood without pain or discomfort, but that they're not experiencing that in isolation. And of course, focusing in on the connection. You're connecting with them. You're choosing that connection over control. And,
because we really don't have much control.
We don't have much control. She says you're not flying their plane.
Right, she does say that.
You're not supposed to. You have your own plane. Fly your plane, maintain it, but you are the aircraft, your aircraft maintenance on their plane. And I thought that was beautifully put, because it's not possible. You can try and create lots of conflict and tension in the meantime, possibly.
Right, and of course their ability to fly their own plane independently, that's a long journey, right? I loved what one of the parents said. She was like, she has many children, and she said for one of her children who's a toddlerish, and she has 3 in the toddlerish window, right? Yes. And then some older ones, but she said, I have to fly her plane because there's a lot of turbulence. And I thought, that is brilliant, right? Like, she really needs me. I'm taking over the flying right now. Like, and I love that. And I know one of the analogies I love also about that journey of parenting and letting them go. And it's also true in the classroom, but that you hold them close for like the first 12 years. You're holding them a little tighter. And then during that 12 years, like a kite, like you pull the kite in really tight and you slowly are letting it out. And then sometimes you got to reel it back in because it gets a little windy, a little turbulent, right? And then you let it back out, and then by the time they're 12, they've hit a certain stage of development, you can let it out a little bit more. But as soon as they do something that could be dangerous to them, or you actually are pulling that kite back in to say, I'm connected, I'm here, which is what she's saying in her way too, is I'm connected to you, you're connected to me. You are still safe in this world because I'm not going to let you if I can help it.
Yes.
Based on feedback from the parents, Sophia, was there anything, or what was it that set this book apart from some of the others that we've read together in the past?
So I think one of the big things that we had a lot of feedback on was her presentation of both scripts and examples, practical application for our daily rhythms. So she would present a situation, with a child at a restaurant or just something like that and say, so now this is how you might approach it with an authoritative parenting style.
Right.
This is how you might approach it with an indulgent parenting style. And now let's look at how we would do this with a secure, connected parenting style.
Which is the goal.
Which is the goal, right? And so it was really interesting for me personally. I thought, ooh, I'm gravitating towards that authoritative style. What can I learn from this? So that was another one of those points where I was like, this is talking to me. But on another level from that, so it was really nice to have that practical feedback or practical application presented, but also next leveling up, she acknowledged, in one example specifically, presenting it, we're going to go, I'm going to separate you two. It's time to go talk about this and reiterate that sentence. And if the child still isn't coming with you, then you pick up the flailing child and carry them to a space where it's safe to talk about it. So I really appreciate that because I have 3 little boys and there's often someone screaming or flailing and they don't always come to, they're not ready to connect and have conversation as she addresses until they're calm, right?
Absolutely.
So getting them to a calm space is really important. But yes, so the examples and then the scripts.
Yeah, and the scripts I want to tag onto that too because, so just to give you guys a better idea of what we're talking about, she would give you the specific language to use. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, the parents are just going to eat this up because it's so nice to take something in a small chunk that's really applicable that you can, tomorrow I have some tools in my toolbox. And she does this several times in the book, but here these are, for example, tips and scripts for using connection to encourage cooperation. And so she'll break that down in the different stages of development. So for an infant or baby, you might say something like, I'm here, I hear you. And then for toddlers, this feels hard for you. And then she goes on with preschool scripts. And there are several examples for each of these stages of development. So elementary school, I love that you are asking questions. And scientists have asked some of the same questions and found answers. Would you like me to explain how I know this? And you're doing that cooperation. We're working together, connection. And so she includes middle school, and our school goes through middle school, but it also includes high school. And so I think it's so nice as parents, as people who spend their time with children and care about children, to say throughout the stages, how does that look? Because we know preschoolers are not, incomplete middle schoolers. They're not, that they need a different kind of language and they need to be met in that developmental stage. So knowing how you shift that as children grow, I think no wonder the parents really enjoyed the scripts. It's really nice to just have some language to lean on until you're developing your own repertoire.
I agree with that. It's nice to have some phrases that you can go to as a parent and a teacher, especially if you're not sure how you're going to handle it yet, to breathe and underreact and have a phrase or two like, tell me more, or why do you ask, or just some that we have here. But even this high school script, I'm going to put it in my pocket because they don't need you as much, but you still want to be there for them. And it's important to me as a mom to know I'm here for you whenever you need me, and that they know that.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can work this through together, but how exactly do you say that to someone who's a hormonal middle schooler and who, and I just think, middle schoolers are really in the same stage of development as toddlers. So, the language, the vocabulary expands, but a lot of the same stuff applies for that stage of development, where I can do so much and I understand so much, but yet I'm held back by limitations I don't like. But yeah, how do you do that so you're still connecting?
Yeah,
and
this
so
is a great resource that she offers, the script.
It really
Page
is.
40.
Yeah. Just for the first set, there are several,
Yeah,
so, right?
right.
So that's really awesome. That was a great resource. I agree.
And what about the nerd alerts?
The nerd alerts, some people loved them, some people might not have as much, but as she said in the beginning of the book, that was another thing about her delivery of this information and her style of writing that I loved, was she said, I'm going to have nerd alerts because this is my background and this is the information and this is all about the child development and, the brain science. But if you skip them, if you skip those little nerd alerts that are highlighted on your pages, you're not going to miss anything. And so that was a beautiful way, I thought, to approach a book that is, very relatable, and you can skip over all the science-backed information and just move right along.
Again, and I'm sure that's not me. I'm not
Right,
that person,
I like
but
it
this
too.
is my field of work, right? This is what I built my life doing, is studying how children, humans develop. But for some people, they're like, you know what? It doesn't really matter to me, the why behind the what. Please just tell me what to do.
Right.
You know, and
I
so
appreciate
that's beautiful.
that it's backed, right? I appreciate,
Sure.
oh, good, she's backing it on this. Okay, great, but I'm just going to skip over that.
Yeah.
So that was a
Absolutely.
nice balance of presentation. You've got some really dense books, you've got some really fluffy books, but I felt like she had a really nice, direct approach.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think that's great too, because there's a lot of shifting in parenting in general, right? From maybe the way our parents or our grandparents, parented, maybe not, but I do hear from parents a lot in our community, like, how do I help my parents understand the way we're raising these children? And of course, gentle parenting has gotten a really bad rap in some ways. I think because it's, in my opinion, basically a little bit of the approach to that is a little bit off, because what really it should be is connected parenting.
Yes.
And so I think she's really hit the mark in this book with the connected parenting, but having those scripts and having the nerd alerts. Sorry, is what I was thinking about. Having those nerd alerts to go back to. Like if you're struggling with your parents or somebody, an aunt or an uncle or somebody that you really care about, and you want to connect and you want to help them understand why you're not harshly punishing your children and what that looks like, and why you can go back to the nerd alert and say, like, okay, what's the science behind that? Why? What's the why behind, and really, that being said, we don't owe huge explanations to anybody who questions us about how we're raising our children. Who we
true.
owe, I mean, the person that we owe the explanation to, if anybody, is the child. So I encourage parents, when they're being questioned, to put a little space there and realize that your job isn't to defend you necessarily, and your job isn't to help them understand in a minute. You can take time if they really care and want to know deeply, but your job is to protect and advocate for your child. And I think we're so quick to want to explain why it's okay that we forget that the most important thing is the child is thriving. But those nerd alerts really do give you some tools to quickly go back and go, okay, this person in my life, we really do care, and they want to understand, and I'm able to help them with this sweet resource.
Yeah.
I know I pass I either snap a picture or send things along, or even just post a little something on social media, just get information out there. I know, and it's one of them that I did with this book was I call it, we try not to good job our children. And so I really appreciated her nerd alert about emphasizing which is the school focuses on how they're working, what they're doing, what they're enjoying about their work, and not just, oh, good job. You've the performance base, which turns into people pleasing, and how that confidence isn't there not as much when you do that. So it is nice to pass that bit along when you come across it.
I think there's just a lot about those scripts and nerd alerts that set this book apart as being a really usable tool.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I know in the conflict chapter, she talked about allowing behavior, or the perception of parents allowing behavior when you don't approach it with punishment, yelling, spanking on the spot. And I thought that was a really good perspective shift to think, okay, even though you might feel that pressure, because we're talking about maybe generationally or peers or society pressures, you might be perceived as allowing certain behavior, but you're meeting that behavior and allowing them to process through it with connection. So, because, it's inevitable. You feel that little bit of like, ooh, am I doing the right thing? Anyway, but it's a long-term goal. It's a long-term goal, and we'll see those fruits as they start to cope with their own relationships and challenges as they get older. But all the tantrums right now can cloud that a little bit.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that she is so authentic about that. Like you were saying, like, you remove the child, these things are really going to happen. It's not as simple as pie in the sky information that comes from a lot of books. There's a real, piece to it that's just bare bones. This is going to be rough. She talks about that.
She does. Yeah.
There's going to be hard. There are going to be hard pieces to this, and just like everything, our society has become one of, quick answers. Ask Siri, fast food. We know right now. We want to see the results of the learning immediately. And it is such a long journey. Life is a whole journey. Like to compartmentalize it in, right there we learned that, and right there we did that, and right there we accomplished that. But all of it is a slow, long journey. And once we can wrap our brains around that, I think you can breathe so much easier and you can rest in that. And she, of course, does talk again about it. This is a long journey. You're not going to say, oh, you're not going to take that script and you're not going to use that language in that stage once and it's going to just change everything. But it's moment to moment connecting.
Yes.
Which I think we share a little bit about the 30% and about that conversation.
Oh, yes. So every day you wake up and you try again, right? So I know that's kind of our parenting motto. And as she states in the book, if you're winning 30% of the time, you're winning, you're doing good. And we had, was it a parent last night? She said, I'm just going to put that above my door, like 30% as my reminder, I'm not failing.
It's doable.
It's doable. It's achievable. And I thought that was really nice. It was good to have those reminders, and every now and then something from a book will make it on your wall, and that's
right.
Perfect.
So perfect. Well, I figure if you get one or two gems from anything that you read, you're winning, and there are so many gems in this one. So, and that 30% really does help us remember that you're not going to be perfect. There are going to be things that go wrong. There are going to be times that we slip, because this is learning for us too as parents. We're also learning as we go. And so it's not about the mistakes that we made. It's about the connection that we maintained. It's that even in the moments you breathe and you come back to, I've still got you. And I need grace too. I'm going to give you grace because one day you're going to realize I needed some grace too. And I can say firsthand, I know that works with my children who are in their mid-20s, one nearing 30 now, that they don't really remember the times that I've beaten myself up for, where maybe I know in particular, and I shared this at the book talk too, that with one of my children, that as an adult, I've said to her, like, oh, remember that time that I yelled at you? And, because I still remember it so vividly because it just hurt my heart that I did that to my sweet child, And she had no recollection of that. So my parenting advice was, don't ask them when they're adults, because if you're lucky, they don't remember. But we remember because we're trying so hard and we know that it matters. And but really it is that long game of connection. I've said before too, really one of the things that makes good parents is you keep showing up. You just keep showing up for that connection, and that will cover a multitude of mistakes, right? Because we're human, and they know from that genuine connection with you, and they build that for you.
And speaking to the long-term goal, she mentions reaching out instead of shutting down or freaking out. And I feel like that morphs from toddlers to, children and teens and adults, and about that shift in who they're going to, but they come back to you when it really matters, and how when they're adults, your role is replaced essentially, but in a healthy way. And if you cause, back to the scripts, she has some scripts on, oh, you're not my baby anymore. You've replaced me, and how those things can come naturally to us.
And those are negative scripts.
They're negative scripts.
Right.
Yes. Clarification there. But, you don't want to say that because, they might not come to you. That severs that connection there. So just really into adulthood and how that role is going to morph and shift. And
you have to, beautiful. I think you have to perceive the parenting journey as, I'm working myself out of a job. Right? Like the goal has to be for them to be whole, healthy human beings. It has to be you've given them the tools and the support and the connection they need to stand on their own and find a partner who will help them, not complete them, because we don't need to be completed by someone else, but that will walk alongside them and be their person, that you're never going to be replaced. And if you struggle with feelings of that, you really should probably get some help, because that's a real thing for some people, and that can be really hard because you pour so much into, our families and raising our children and what have you. You're not going to be replaced, but you're going to have a different role. And we're working ourselves out of a job so that they can find that person. And we should never make them feel guilty about that, know. And of course, there's some things we say in jest and we joke with our children when they become adults. That is one of the payoffs, right? Is that they become your friends. They're not your friends when they're little, but when they get older and into adulthood, you can become their friends and you can joke about things openly, and we enjoy them because we're connected. But yeah, they're supposed to find that person, and we need to know that that's when we're winning. We did it, Right. But I can say there are times, and my daughter is married, and there are times when even still she will call me when she feels like the world is, spinning. And I love that, and, but I also know that the world is spinning. There are times her world is spinning and she's not calling me, but I know she's okay because she has someone who loves her dearly. So, but it is hard.
It is hard. It makes me think of, those things you say just because they seem okay and natural. It makes me think of the things that we're shifting generationally, like stigmas that we had on certain roles, or, saying, I guess I'll mention the John Wayne myth. I can't help but to bring it up, but,
it's important.
Rub some dirt on it. Strength is numbness, and pain is weakness. And just shifting past that to, of course, feeling those emotions, and how do you handle that instead of internalizing that pain and internalizing those emotions and never dealing with them.
Right.
Because how healthy is that? So just really helping to teach. Well, and as my husband and I do, we take a phrase and we take a couple of months and we work on that one phrase, because it's hard.
Brilliant.
It's hard to shift that, because we realize how ingrained it is in us.
Sure.
To respond to something with a phrase or a word or a reaction. So
that's really wonderful. Those are some lucky boys, right?
I get lots and lots of practice.
There you go. And it doesn't ever make perfect, but it definitely makes better, right? It's such a great thing that y'all partner in doing that. You're fortunate. Yeah. But I think that whole expectation, that shift in society from men really being the John Wayne myth, the perfect example of that being, that you push those feelings down and that you just power through. And now learning how we deal with that, the John Wayne myth, and realizing that you're supposed to push those feelings down, and that, you don't deal with those emotions. And now in society, men in particular are so much more involved in the family and raising the children, and they're shifting from, my job used to be to go out and hunt the food, to go out and make the money, to go, and now I'm doing that and I'm being fully emotionally brilliant. And it's a journey for everyone. And, women are saying, okay, my job used to be, that I was at home as the homemaker and I cooked I cooked the food that he killed, and now I'm running the house while he's coming home and dinner has to be on the table. And I would have been horrible at that. And I'm also juggling a full-time job, or, and of course parenting, being at home with children is a full-time job. But a lot of people, in addition to that, so you have men and women whose roles in society are broadening, and yet never was there's a lot of time to develop that emotional understanding and intelligence, and we need to do that. And so we've got a lot of ways to go. The journey is good for all of us, but that John Wayne myth really spoke to me in particular, mostly because my gramps, who I adored, and he was precious and lovely and cheerful and all the things, but he loved John Wayne. I don't really know why, but a lot of people did. Kudos to John Wayne, I guess. But it was always dark and there was a Western on, so never a fan of that for some reason.
Well, I like how later in that chapter, as she was discussing, emotional training and getting past that and into seeing and feeling those emotions, she mentions that emotional needs should not evolve into independence, but rather into healthy and secure interdependence. And when I'm struggling, I reach out to my friends, or basically when I'm struggling, I can reach out and I don't have to keep it in. So I thought that was a really nice way to say it. I feel like sometimes we're looking forward. What's next? Oh, my child can brush their teeth. Oh, they can do this. Oh, they're potty trained. All these things. And it's okay. It's natural to get excited about those things. But at the same time, I feel like that mentality is kind of like seeking that independence and looking forward to it. And so it's really nice to say, oh, that's right. We're teaching them how to be able to reach out when they need to. And anyway, just so many pieces to that about childhood, and we get so caught up. And I love reminders to stop. Say, oh,
savor the moment.
Savor the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
I appreciate the season.
I think something to think about too in that interdependence versus independence is when they're learning those, when they're hitting those milestones. Of course, in jest, and also there's a level of reality too. As they become independent, I can breathe because they don't need to rely on me for everything, but also knowing that, or considering, do we want that independence for them because it is a mark of their development and their confidence building and their ability to enjoy things when they're ready? They can go pick up the book and look at it on their own. They can go do, or do we want them to be independent from us primarily because we're overwhelmed? And I think that both of those things can be happening at the same time. But when you're going to have the interdependence, you're really okay with them still needing you to help brush their teeth. You're really okay with, because it's about celebrating their accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
And so to be interdependent as they grow, they're always going to need you here and there, even when they develop new skills.
That's a good point.
I think so. She actually talked about milestones, didn't she? She talked about how they can be bittersweet, but how to work through those with your children, and something to be celebrated, but also working on those scripts. Yeah.
So I think let's talk about one last thing before we wrap up here. Okay. Is there something pressing that you're like, I want to be sure that we share this with people?
Oh goodness. One last thing. Well, I don't know. She talked about so many great things in those last chapters, from the conflict to the types of protection. I mean, the protection was really interesting to me. Making the mistake of controlling them for protection and instilling that fear. And I guess we might have talked about that a little bit, and then mistaking that permissiveness for protection. Like, and a lot of that I feel like comes from our past, right? We think, we were so reined in, and maybe our parents were strict, so we're going to give it all. And so it's finding that balance, and then mistaking dominance for protection. I thought that one was really interesting, and distinguishing, how that instills a fear in your child of, well, if anyone hurts you, I'll hurt them, and thinking, well, instead of I'll break your back, I've got your back. And because think about that, how so just she really touched on so many great things, and structure and consistency. She had an incredible chapter on tricky topics that we probably don't have time to get into, but I thought that was a wonderful thing. There's so many topics as our children go through the various stages, and just encouraging, talk about them early, be that person that they come to,
right?
And introducing it, and then they come back because they're ready for more, and giving it more. And
of course I feel compelled to say that too, when they're coming to you for information, to make sure you ask the question, which isn't in the book, but it's one of my own life experiences, and that I encourage people in, is to ask them, why do you ask?
Why do you ask?
Because they will come back to you for more information, but a lot of times they'll ask us something, and we have our adult perception of what that is. And so we answer them from the adult perspective, and it's way heavier than they're ready to carry. Yes. And so making sure that you say, why do you ask that? Because understanding what's framing their questions is so important. What's influencing those reflections and questions they're having, because our answers sometimes can, like I said, carry a very adult explanation for something, when really it's coming from a completely different situation that we wouldn't anticipate or entertain. So it's really important, from a young age, to ask, like, why do you ask that? So you also can get to their hearts and what's going on, because sometimes they just don't know how to ask also, and it comes across differently to us.
that came up at book talk. One parent was saying, my child asks questions over and over and over again, and I don't want to be the parent who says, because I said so. And then we talked about how that question, she'd started to use that based on a parent education night. She received that information and that tool, and so she started to do that, and she said, I realize I'm answering her question quicker because I'm realizing where it's coming from.
Yeah, I'm realizing what the question is.
What the question
right?
actually
Because it's like you think, oh, okay, they're asking, whatever, know. And so how many feet are in a yard? 3, and really they don't even know you don't know where that's coming from. So you're giving them one answer and they keep asking you and they're asking you. And really what they're trying to do is get an answer to their question, which they can't articulate as well. Right. So when you say, why do you ask? You can understand a little bit better. And she did. I had forgotten about that. So, but yeah, it's an important thing to me. So
it is. Yeah. But I thought, to wrap it up, I loved the way she wrote this book and the delivery, and it was very, very relatable and personal for a lot of us, I think. But just as far as the very last pages, I know I spoke with another mom who said I just read the last few lines and I just cried, because I thought she basically left it with a loving forward and blessings. And I won't read through all of them, but just the last couple, may your children be people who know how to initiate repair after rupture. May your children know what it feels like to be securely attached to you, and in return, you with them. So those are just the last 2 of a dozen beautiful blessings that she leaves the reader with.
Love that. I loved the way she did that.
Yes.
I felt like that was really powerful.
Sometimes the ending can really do a lot. So
well, and I think also just reiterating, talking about our children, getting that deeper or that dependent attachment, maybe that's an interdependent attachment from their spouse or from, as they move into adults, a best friend or what have you. I love that she talks about that too, that our children are perpetually moving forward. I did not say moving on. No one moves on from their attachment to their parents. And these last 2 pages are worth the whole book. Like you just, there's so much, it gives you such a sense of peace and focus. Like, imagine if we all knew how to repair after rupture. Right?
It's powerful.
Oh, and every one of them is. And I really, kudos to her. I am not often all in on a book of any kind that we read or that I read in general, and I just feel like there's a lot of really useful information.
Yes.
And nerd alerts. I love a nerd alert. So
and I haven't gotten into them in depth, but I know she has a website and a podcast. Is that
I
right?
heard that. I have not. Yeah.
But also even a workbook called Securely Attached, and that one was for adults that I have not looked into yet. But
one of the parents brought that.
She brought it last night for some people to look at, that she published just a year before this book.
Yeah, it was before this book, which I thought was so interesting.
Me too. She saw the need for this book, or was working on this book likely.
Oh, I want to know. I'm going to have to find out, because I do wonder.
Research on that, but maybe in the notes we can include some of those resources.
Sure. And that workbook is working through your own things that happened in childhood. And I do think that, and we did talk about this a little bit, coming to a place of grace for our own parents, and that we understand that most parents did the best they could with what they had, and maybe the best they could isn't the best. There were circumstances and things, and it's not always about knowledge. It's not always about having the information on child development. It's about what's happening in their lives. How hard was it to generate a livable income? Who was able to stay home with children? Who wasn't? What else were you dealing with? Like all of us, we have a lot going on. And so just developing an understanding, yes, but also I think a multitude of grace for our parents. And then there are even times that we're going to have grace for our parents, and some of us are just going to feel a little bit sorry for them when you realize their childhood experiences or I think that when you can get to a place where you go, this happened, and yes, I can directly see, because I've done this workbook, I can directly see a connection to my childhood or my parent, but the reality is, I mean, bless them, they had a hard childhood themselves. And they didn't have the tools or the support, or sometimes they just don't want to do the work because it's overwhelming. That's a fact too. But to say, I have grace and sympathy because I understand also what happened to them made them respond the way they did to me. Mm-hmm. And so I think, going all the way through and ending with, what our goals are for our children. And I think one of those goals for me, one of my hopes for all of us as adults is when we do reflect on what happened to me in my childhood and what went wrong. And you know what? Your children are going to do that to you too. You might do it to your parents, and you're encouraged to do it almost in books like this and in these practices of why do you respond to behaviors or situations the way you do? Well, it's because of how you perceived life growing up and how you perceived it in a recent experience. And so one of those, I would hope as we love on, like she says at the end, would be coming to a place of grace and compassion and sympathy, peace about whatever it is that informed who we are. Right. We're all just walking each other home. It's just a journey.
That's true. So we would really recommend this book if you haven't read it yet. Yeah. And we will leave some of her websites and links in the notes below.
Yeah. So definitely, I think it's a good read. So start your own book club, book talk, whatever you want to call it, or just read it yourself. But it's an easy thing to read, and it's important work. So until next time.
Thanks for joining us today. To learn more and join the movement, go to savechildhood.org.